The first hints of humanity's entry into the galactic stage were far from grand. Their initial exploration efforts were met with indifference. Earth had barely begun to understand the mechanics of faster-than-light travel, and most of the galaxy's advanced civilizations viewed them as little more than another curious species fumbling around the edges of the cosmos. Humanity's technological prowess was considered primitive, their ships outdated, their weapons ineffective. Still, Earth's unyielding drive for survival and discovery had brought them to this moment. The galaxy was vast, but they had a spark, an untapped potential that many didn't see, and it was about to be revealed. At the heart of Earth's rising hope was a group of visionary engineers and military strategists. Their ambition had started with a simple goal: to create a weapon that could level the playing field. They called it the Railgun, a piece of technology that seemed almost rudimentary compared to the glittering, hyper-advanced weaponry of other races. But what it lacked in sophistication, it made up for in raw power. On a quiet morning in a facility hidden deep within Earth's northern reaches, the human railgun was tested for the first time. The room buzzed with excitement and tension. A small group of scientists and military officers gathered to witness the moment that could change everything. A massive asteroid drifted through space, a perfect target for this experimental weapon. It was the only test humanity would get. Fail, and they'd remain forever stuck in the shadow of the galaxy's more powerful races. Succeed, and they would have the key to a future beyond their world. The railgun was mounted on a makeshift station designed for the test. The air was thick with anticipation as one of the lead engineers, Dr. Emma Klein, stood by the controls. Her fingers hovered over the switch. "Ready, Dr. Klein," a technician called out. She nodded, and with a deep breath, pressed the button. The sound of the gun's activation was deafening, a crack that echoed through the facility, followed by the rapid whine of energy being funneled into the massive railgun's coils. The projectile, a simple piece of metal, was hurled out at unimaginable speeds. The effect was instantaneous. A flash of light. The asteroid, once massive and unyielding, was ripped apart in a spectacular explosion, sending debris scattering in all directions. The room erupted in cheers, but Dr. Klein's face was grim. She had known the risks. They had succeeded in creating something that could change the entire course of galactic history, but such power came with no guarantees. Within hours, news of the test spread across Earth. It wasn't long before it reached the ears of other species, those who had long looked down on humanity. The Exiratheans, a race of militaristic beings known for their empire-building and authoritarianism, scoffed at the humans' primitive weapon, dismissing it as a mere curiosity. Their arrogance was unmatched, and they believed no threat, however small, could challenge their hold on the galaxy. But humanity's railgun was unlike anything they had encountered before. It wasn't just the power of the weapon that would transform the future, it was the human drive behind it. The drive to survive, the drive to innovate, the drive to challenge what was considered impossible. The first rumblings of a new era began as factions across the galaxy shifted their attention to Earth. The tide of history was turning, but no one knew it yet. The galaxy's long-held assumptions about the power structures were about to be shattered by a single species that had only just begun to realize its true potential. In the weeks that followed the asteroid test, humanity's railgun technology quickly spread through the galactic communication networks, drawing both praise and skepticism. To the more established and civilized species, Earth's sudden surge in military capability was a curiosity, one that they didn't quite know how to handle. Some alien governments dismissed the humans as reckless, while others took the more cautious approach of gathering intelligence, watching carefully to see what they would do next. But for all the doubt and uncertainty, something fundamental had shifted. The Exiratheans, in particular, could not ignore the implications. They were one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy, with fleets of ships designed for domination. To them, humanity's railgun was a minor annoyance, something that could be swatted aside. But as the days passed, The growing uncertainty in their ranks began to gnaw at their confidence. They had not anticipated this. They had not anticipated a race like humanity, who, despite their lack of advanced tech, could create a weapon capable of piercing through their defenses. Their initial dismissal of the railgun would soon prove to be a costly mistake. It was a day like any other when the first human fleet, equipped with the new railgun technology, set out on a routine patrol to a nearby system. At least, that's how it appeared on the surface. In truth, the fleet was testing its new capabilities in real combat conditions. The humans knew that the Xi-Rathians would likely strike first, seeing the growing influence of Earth as a challenge to their centuries of dominance. But what they didn't anticipate was the swift response of a small group of alien raiders, notorious for preying on weaker worlds. The first battle began without warning. A fleet of alien vessels, heavily armed and far superior in numbers, dropped out of FTL travel near the human fleet's position. The aliens, expecting to easily overpower the humans, immediately opened fire. But the humans had one advantage: the railguns. As the first few enemy ships charged toward the human fleet, their sensors picked up the energy signatures of the railguns charging up. Before the alien raiders could even react, a flash of light illuminated the dark expanse of space. A single, high-velocity projectile rocketed from one of the human ships, striking the lead raider ship with pinpoint precision. The explosion was instantaneous. A chain reaction spread through the alien vessel, and within moments, the raider's flagship was torn to pieces. The remaining raiders hesitated, their commanders struggling to process what had just happened. The humans had no such hesitation. Another shot was fired, and another raider was obliterated. The human ships moved quickly, their tactics sharp and deliberate. They knew that their ships weren't as advanced as the aliens in terms of sheer firepower or technology, but they made up for it with speed, precision, and an overwhelming surprise factor. Within minutes, the raider fleet was in full retreat, leaving behind debris and the wreckage of their once proud ships. The human fleet had suffered minimal damage, and the raiders, despite their advanced weaponry, were left to lick their wounds. News of this unexpected victory spread quickly throughout the galaxy. At first, some factions, still skeptical of the human railguns, questioned the outcome. Was it a fluke? Had the aliens simply underestimated the humans? But the consensus was clear. Humanity had just proven that it wasn't just a curiosity. It was a force to be reckoned with. The Xi-Rathians, now facing the undeniable fact that humanity could destroy their ships with ease, began to take notice. The once dismissed human race had just delivered a punch that left their pride wounded. The galaxy's equilibrium had shifted, and the Xi-Rathian leadership began preparing for something they hadn't expected. A threat from an enemy they had long considered beneath them. On Earth, Dr. Emma Klein, the scientist behind the railgun's design, watched the news with a sense of pride, but also of unease. She knew that the real test was still ahead. The Xi-Rathians would not let this insult go unpunished. They would come for humanity, and when they did, they would bring everything they had. But one thing had already been made clear: the human race was no longer just a bystander in the galaxy. They had proven that they could not only survive but thrive, even when faced with overwhelming odds. And this was just the beginning. The victory against the alien raiders had shaken the galaxy. Yet as the humans celebrated their success, a darker storm brewed in the hearts of the Xi-Rathian leadership. The small, unassuming species they had long dismissed had just shattered their arrogance with a single weapon. Humanity, now equipped with the railgun, had proven that even the most powerful empires could be vulnerable. On Cyrathia, the capital planet of the Xi-Rathian Empire, the High Command convened in a tense, closed-door meeting. Chancellor Korath, a towering figure whose scales shimmered with the glow of power, slammed his fist onto the table. The holographic display projected an image of the destroyed raider fleet, followed by images of human ships armed with the railgun. "We cannot allow this to continue," Korath growled, his voice deep and menacing. These humans dare to think they can challenge the might of the HFY Empire. Their primitive technology, their reckless ingenuity. This ends now. Admiral Varish, a seasoned tactician known for her cold efficiency, nodded solemnly. We've underestimated them. Their railgun may be a simple weapon, but it is one that we cannot afford to ignore. We must strike before their influence spreads further. It was settled. The Exirathians would invade human space, with the intent not only to crush humanity's fledgling military force, but to demonstrate to the galaxy that their empire remained supreme. They would make an example of Earth. The first target was a newly established human colony on the fringes of the Outer Rim, a remote system, strategically important, but not yet heavily fortified. The Exirathians launched a surprise invasion, sending an overwhelming fleet to obliterate the colony before the humans had a chance to react. Back on Earth, Dr. Emma Klein and the human military command were watching closely. The Exirathians had made their move. The humans now had only one choice: fight back or risk everything they had built. Within hours, the human fleet was mobilized. Though their ships were few in number, they were equipped with the railguns, each one capable of piercing the Exirathian warships with terrifying precision. The Exirathian fleet was massive, but the humans had something else on their side: the element of surprise and the fierce will to protect their home. The battle began in the cold vacuum of space. Exirathian warships, sleek and menacing, rained fire down on the human colony, which stood little chance against the advanced firepower of the invaders. But the human fleet arrived just in time, moving swiftly through the debris field. Dr. Klein watched from the command center, her heart pounding in her chest. The railguns hummed with energy, preparing for the first strike. She glanced over at Captain Thomas Hale, the human fleet commander, who gave her a determined nod. "We've trained for this," Hale said quietly. "We're not just defending a colony. We're defending humanity's future." The first shot was fired. A high-speed projectile, glowing with the energy of humanity's will, ripped through the cold darkness and struck the Exirathian battleship. The ship exploded into a cloud of debris, its shields no match for the railgun's force. The human fleet didn't hesitate. Another shot was fired, and then another. One by one, the Exirathian ships fell, their massive hulls crumpling under the relentless barrage of railgun fire. But the Exirathians weren't about to back down so easily. They regrouped, deploying their own reinforcements from nearby systems, and intensified their assault. The battle raged on, each side giving and taking, each side fighting for dominance. The human fleet, though vastly outnumbered, held their ground with surprising resolve, their railguns cutting through Exirathian ships like a hot knife through butter. At the climax of the battle, Captain Hale ordered a final push. The human ships, now battered but still standing strong, launched one last coordinated strike. The railguns fired in unison, sending a barrage of high-velocity projectiles that tore through the heart of the remaining Exirathian fleet. The remaining ships, now in disarray, retreated, leaving the human colony intact. The victory was hard-earned, but humanity had done it again. They had faced down a much more powerful enemy, and against all odds triumphed. The Exirathians, bruised and humiliated, would not forget this lesson. The news spread quickly across the galaxy. Humanity's railguns had claimed another victory, one that echoed throughout the cosmos. But even in the aftermath of this battle, the humans knew that the Exirathians were not done. They would come again, stronger and more determined. And the war for the future of the galaxy had only just begun. The victory at the colony was a resounding statement, but it had not come without cost. The Exirathians, bruised and humiliated, retreated, but not without plans for retaliation. Their pride had been wounded in front of the galaxy, and they would stop at nothing to avenge their defeat. If anything, the loss had made them more dangerous. On Serathia, Chancellor Koref convened another war council, this time with an air of cold calculation. He had underestimated humanity once, and he would not make that mistake again. The defeat of their fleet was a blow to his authority, and if he didn't respond decisively, it could spark a rebellion across his empire. His eyes glinted with resolve. "We will break them," Korath declared, his voice seething with fury. "Humanity's railgun may have pierced our ships, but they are not invincible. Their tactics are too predictable. This time, we will strike in a way they cannot anticipate." The Xyrethians' response would be twofold. First, they would develop countermeasures against the railgun technology. If they could neutralize the humans' greatest weapon, the galaxy would see their true power once more. Second, they would engage humanity on multiple fronts, distracting them with smaller skirmishes to divide their attention and resources. If they could wear the humans down before the final confrontation, it would be a decisive victory. Back on Earth, Dr. Klein and the military high command knew the Xyrathians wouldn't simply let their failure slide. The news of the retreat had been broadcast across the galaxy, but they had no illusions. This was just the calm before the storm. The humans had to prepare for the next assault, one that would likely test the limits of their technology and resolve. In the weeks that followed, Earth's scientists worked tirelessly, improving railgun designs and developing new strategies. But it wasn't just the railgun they had to worry about. The Xyrathians had begun to deploy their countermeasures. They had developed shields that could absorb or deflect high-velocity projectiles, rendering the railgun's previous advantages useless. Humanity had won the last battle, but they had no illusions that they could rely solely on their railguns anymore. Captain Thomas Hale, who had led the human fleet in the previous victory, now found himself leading a new kind of war effort, one that required more than just raw firepower. The humans would need to adapt. Speed, surprise, and innovation would be their weapons now. They began to train in new tactics, stealth maneuvers, guerrilla-style attacks, and strategies to overwhelm the Xyrathians' newly fortified defenses. But despite their best efforts, the Xyrathians were relentless. They began their counteroffensive with terrifying precision. Small, quick strikes on isolated colonies, designed to stretch humanity thin and force them into a defensive posture. The alien empire's ships, outfitted with new shield technology, began to appear at key human outposts, launching surgical strikes that decimated human defenses before retreating into the shadows. The Xyrathians were playing a game of attrition, and they were good at it. The human fleet, while capable of matching the Xyrathians' firepower, was starting to buckle under the pressure. The humans had no choice but to send reinforcements from Earth's main military hubs, hoping that more ships would tip the balance in their favor. But time was running out. Every moment spent defending small outposts was a moment the Xyrathians could use to regroup, develop new countermeasures, and further erode human confidence. During one such engagement, the humans were caught in an ambush near the border of Xyrathian-controlled space. Captain Hale's fleet had been baited into a trap, forced to defend a small, strategic asteroid mining colony, only to be surrounded by an overwhelming number of Xyrathian warships. The shields on their railguns, once their greatest advantage, were failing under the sustained assault of the Xyrathian weaponry. The human fleet was outnumbered, and the situation was growing desperate. As the battle raged on, a cold realization set in. The humans could no longer rely on sheer firepower alone. The railguns had been a game-changer, but the Xyrathians had learned quickly, and they were no longer vulnerable. Humanity needed to find a new edge, a new innovation. It was in this moment of crisis that Dr. Klein proposed a radical solution, a new type of railgun, one that used not only speed and power, but the very energy of the battlefield itself. A railgun that could adapt in real time to counter Xyrathian shields. It was a long shot, but it was their only hope. Captain Hale's face hardened with determination. The war was far from over, and humanity wasn't going to give up now. If the Xyrathians had adapted, so would they. And when they did, they would strike back with a force the galaxy had never seen. The galaxy was at a tipping point. Humanity's early victories had been hard-won, But the Exarathians were relentless in their pursuit of domination. The alien empire's countermeasures against the railguns were proving effective, and the humans were losing ground faster than they had anticipated. The war was far from over, but the future of humanity in the galaxy was becoming uncertain. Dr. Emma Klein stood in the quiet of her lab, her mind racing. The railgun had been humanity's trump card, its great equalizer, but it was no longer enough. The Exarathians had adapted too quickly. Her thoughts flickered back to the early days of the project, when the railgun was nothing more than a dream, a concept she had pushed for when others were skeptical. Now, that same weapon had become the centerpiece of humanity's military might. But even the most powerful weapons had their limits. In the lab with her were some of the brightest minds Earth had to offer, all working tirelessly to devise a new solution. There had to be a way to give the humans an advantage, something that Exarathians wouldn't expect, something that could turn the tide in their favor. The railguns had been effective, but their power was finite. And now, the shields of the Exarathians' warships were absorbing the full brunt of their energy. "We need to think bigger," Dr. Klein muttered to herself as she gazed over the schematics on the holoscreen. The idea struck her like a sudden bolt of inspiration. A new kind of weapon, one that could harness not just raw energy, but the very energy of the battlefield itself. "Fusion," she whispered. It was a concept that had long been discussed in theory, but no one had ever fully succeeded in making it a practical reality. However, what if they could harness the potential of fusion in a weaponized form? If they could create a railgun capable of channeling and amplifying the energy from the very fabric of space around them, they could punch through even the most advanced Exarathian shields. It was a gamble, but one that had to be taken. She quickly began running simulations on the idea. Theoretical models began to take shape in front of her eyes. It wasn't perfect yet, but the technology to make it possible was starting to coalesce. The fusion-powered railgun could utilize plasma coils and magnetic fields to supercharge its projectiles, making them even faster and more powerful than the original model. It was bold, untested, but humanity's survival depended on it. Meanwhile, Captain Thomas Hale and his fleet were struggling to hold their ground. The Exarathians had begun pushing deeper into human space, and the situation was becoming dire. The human colonies on the outer rim were falling one by one, and the fleet was stretched thin. Hale's reports were filled with grim news, yet the fighting spirit of the humans remained undiminished. They had lost battles, but they hadn't lost the will to fight. One late evening, as Hale sat in his command center, he received an encrypted message from Dr. Klein. He opened it to see a detailed schematic of a new railgun design. The message was simple, but its implications were clear. "This is our chance. If we can make this work, we'll change everything." Hale's eyes narrowed with determination. The message was a lifeline, a new weapon. This was what they needed to turn the tide. He immediately began making preparations to deploy the new railgun prototype on the front lines. Time was running out, but if humanity could innovate faster than the Exarathians could adapt, they might just have a chance. Dr. Klein's lab had already begun testing prototypes, pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible. They had no choice but to go all in. She contacted Hale directly, her voice steady but urgent. "We're ready to test it," she said. "It's untested, but I'm confident we can make it work. We need to deploy it as soon as possible." Hale didn't hesitate. "Prepare it for the front lines. I'll have my fleet waiting." The stakes had never been higher. Humanity's future depended on a weapon that had yet to prove itself. But the old railguns were no longer enough, and they had no other option. The new fusion-powered railgun would be humanity's last hope. As the final preparations were made, both Earth's military command and Dr. Klein's team knew that the next battle could be the most crucial one yet. The Exarathians were coming. But this time, humanity had something far more dangerous than their railguns, a new weapon, forged in the fires of desperation and innovation. A weapon that could shatter the Empire's supremacy and possibly changed the galaxy forever. The fusion-powered Railgun prototype was humanity's final gamble. Dr. Emma Klein watched the final tests with a mix of excitement and dread. The lab was filled with engineers, scientists, and military advisors, all holding their breath as they powered up the new weapon. For weeks, they had refined the design, using every ounce of human ingenuity and knowledge to make it work. The future of humanity in the galaxy depended on this weapon firing correctly. As the machine roared to life, a low hum reverberated through the room. The projectiles, no longer simple metal slugs, were now infused with a concentrated pulse of energy, thanks to the fusion reactor embedded in the core of the new railgun. The magnetic coils heated up as plasma thrusters ignited, making the weapon glow with a blinding intensity. The energy buildup was almost unbearable, but the calculations had been precise. This was humanity's last shot. "I think we're ready," Dr. Klein said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. She looked to the military advisor standing next to her. "Prepare the fleet. We don't have much time." Across the galaxy, Captain Thomas Hale was also preparing. His fleet, battered from months of skirmishes with the Xyrathians, had been reinforced with the new fusion railguns. They were ready to fight, and to gamble everything on this new weapon. If it worked, it could turn the tide of the war. If it failed, humanity would face annihilation. The coordinates for the next engagement were set. The Xyrathian Empire had launched yet another offensive, this time targeting the human stronghold on the planet Solara, a vital mining world in human space. The planet's defenses were spread thin, and the Xyrathians saw it as the perfect opportunity to strike a decisive blow. Their fleet was massive, and this time they had come prepared with advanced countermeasures against the railgun technology. But the Xyrathians didn't know that humanity had something far more dangerous waiting for them. The battle began with the usual thunderous opening, the Xyrathians unleashing their devastating energy weapons, bombarding the planet's defenses. The human fleet, however, fought back with a fierceness they hadn't shown before. Each ship, now armed with the fusion railguns, held steady as the new weapons charged up, humming with untold power. Captain Hale stood at the command console, watching the battle unfold on the holoscreens. The Xyrathian ships were closing in, their immense size and firepower a formidable threat. But this time, the human fleet wasn't going to just play defense. It was time for the humans to strike first. "Now fire," Hale barked. The first fusion-powered railgun fired with a flash of light so bright it briefly outshone the sun. The projectile, propelled by the sheer force of the fusion energy, shot forward at an unimaginable velocity. The Xyrathian flagship, confident in its reinforced shields, never saw it coming. The fusion slug struck its energy barrier with a shockwave that rippled across the battlefield. The shields flared under the pressure, but the force was too much. With a deafening explosion, the flagship's hull buckled, and the ship disintegrated into a storm of debris. A ripple of surprise spread through the Xyrathian fleet. Their shields, designed to absorb even the most powerful human railgun shots, had failed against the new weapon. The humans had breached their most advanced defense. "Did we?" Dr. Klein whispered to herself as the reports came in. The fusion railgun had worked. The unthinkable had become reality. The Xyrathian fleet, stunned by the destruction of their flagship, faltered. They had never encountered a weapon like this, one that could turn their supposedly impenetrable shields into nothing more than a defense against a mere brush with death. But the humans didn't stop there. Another volley of fusion projectiles launched from the human ships, striking targets with terrifying precision. The second wave of railgun fire ripped through Xyrathian warships, leaving them smoldering in space, unable to mount a proper defense. The humans' newly designed weapon had thrown their enemy into chaos. The tide had shifted. What had been a desperate battle now turned into a decisive human victory. Xyrathian warships tried to regroup, but they couldn't keep up with the pace of the human counterattack. The fusion railguns were relentless, ripping apart ship after ship, tearing through hulls, and leaving nothing but ashes in their wake. In a final act of desperation, the Xyrathians called for reinforcements. However, it was too late. Their remaining ships had been crippled by the new railgun technology, and the human fleet was now pushing them back. When the last Xyrathian ship finally retreated, Captain Hale exhaled deeply, as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. His voice was a mixture of relief and awe. "We've done it." Dr. Klein, watching from Earth's command center, allowed herself a moment of quiet triumph. The fusion railgun had worked. It had done what the original railguns could not, and it had turned the tables in a way humanity had never thought possible. But even as she celebrated the success, a nagging thought lingered in the back of her mind. The Xyrathians would not take this defeat lightly. This victory was just the beginning, and the galaxy was about to become a much more dangerous place. The victory at Solara was a turning point in the war, but it did little to ease the tension in the air. Humanity had unleashed its new weapon, an unimaginable force that had shaken the galaxy. But the Xyrathians were far from beaten. The taste of defeat was bitter for them, and their pride, now bruised beyond measure, demanded retribution. They would not let a mere human invention dictate the fate of their empire. On Cyrathia, Chancellor Korath convened with his war council, his fists clenched in fury. His fleet had been decimated. The destruction of their flagship had been a blow to their morale, and their vaunted shield technology had proven ineffective against the humans' new fusion railguns. He stood before a holographic map of human-controlled space, his mind working furiously. "We've underestimated them," Korath admitted, his voice cold and filled with venom. "But we won't make the same mistake again. The humans have a weapon, yes, but they are still weak. They have only one weapon to rely on, and we will find a way to neutralize it." Admiral Varish, her expression grim, nodded. "Our scientists are working on a new shield design, one that can withstand even the fusion railguns. But more than that, we must take the fight to the humans directly. We need to cripple their command structure and their new weapon manufacturing facilities. If we destroy their capacity to make more of these fusion weapons, they will be forced into submission." Korath turned to his most trusted lieutenants. "Prepare the fleet. We are going to launch a full-scale offensive, targeting their industrial hubs, their weapons research, and their most strategic colonies. We will take the fight to them, and we will make them beg for mercy." Back on Earth, Captain Thomas Hale was preparing for the next phase of the war. Solara was a victory, but it had come at a cost. The battle had drained their resources, and humanity's fleet, though bolstered by the new fusion railguns, was still vulnerable. They needed to repair their ships, resupply, and develop even more advanced technology. The Xyrathians weren't going to give them time to rest. The urgency was palpable. Hale knew that if they didn't press their advantage, the Xyrathians would strike back harder than ever before. And so, humanity's military efforts shifted into high gear. New fleets were commissioned, and every available resource was devoted to bolstering their defenses and enhancing their offensive capabilities. Dr. Klein and her team worked around the clock, fine-tuning the fusion railgun technology and developing new systems to integrate it seamlessly into the fleet. But even as they scrambled to prepare, reports began coming in from the Outer Rim. Xyrathian fleets were mobilizing again. The humans had won battles, but they had not yet won the war. The coming assault would be like nothing they had faced before. Hale stared at the holo map of the galaxy, his mind racing. The Xyrathians were about to hit them with everything they had. Massive fleets, new shield technologies, and a relentless determination to reclaim their lost power. But humanity had one advantage that Xyrathians didn't: unity. The human race, once fractured and divided, had come together in the face of this alien threat. They had become a force to be reckoned with, not just because of their technology, but because of their unyielding spirit. As Hale readied his fleet for the impending confrontation, he contacted Dr. Klein. "The Xyrathians are coming," he said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "It's time to deploy the new railgun systems. We have to push them back before they can regroup." Dr. Klein's voice crackled through the comms. "The systems are ready, Captain. We've made improvements to the fusion railgun. We're incorporating new power distribution systems to increase the efficiency and velocity of the projectiles. If we can get close enough to their flagship fleet, we'll take them out first. Their shield technology may have been upgraded, but it won't stand up to our firepower." "I'll make sure we get in close," Hale replied. "Prepare for the biggest battle humanity has ever faced." The stage was set for the final confrontation. As the human fleet moved into position, Hale stood on the bridge of his flagship, his eyes fixed on the stars ahead. The Xyrathian fleet was coming. The war was about to escalate, and humanity's fate would be determined in the coming hours. On Earth, Dr. Klein watched as the final pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. She knew the risks. The Xyrathians were stronger than ever, and this could be their last chance to stop them. If the humans failed, the galaxy would fall under Xyrathian rule. But if they succeeded, it could change everything. The future was uncertain, but humanity's resolve was unwavering. They would fight, they would innovate, and they would win. The reckoning was coming, and humanity would not back down. The day of reckoning had arrived. The air was thick with anticipation as the human fleet gathered at the edge of the Xyrathian-controlled space, preparing for the largest and most decisive battle in galactic history. The fusion railguns had been upgraded, the fleet was reinforced, and humanity's resolve was stronger than ever. But the Xyrathians had come prepared, their ships bristling with new technology, and their strategy more refined than ever. Captain Thomas Hale stood on the bridge of the Sovereign, his flagship, staring at the holographic map in front of him. He could see the Xyrathian fleet advancing, their ships forming a massive, impenetrable wall. This would not be like any of the skirmishes they had fought before. The Xyrathians had been forced into a corner, and they would fight with everything they had. "Captain," said Lieutenant Grayson, breaking his reverie, "the Xyrathian fleet is closing in. They've deployed multiple new warship types, heavy destroyers, and command vessels. Their shields are significantly upgraded." "I know," Hale replied, his voice steady. "They've learned from their previous losses. But so have we. This is it, Grayson. The last stand." His crew scrambled to their stations, each person focused on their task, knowing that failure was not an option. The next few hours would decide the fate of humanity, the future of the galaxy, and whether Earth would fall under the shadow of the Xyrathian Empire. Across the battlefield, the Xyrathian fleet advanced in perfect formation. Chancellor Korath's flagship loomed at the head of the fleet, its sleek, black hull gleaming in the light of the distant stars. He watched the human fleet through his own command center, his face a mask of cold determination. This would be the final strike that would erase humanity's defiance once and for all. "Deploy all fleets," Korath commanded. "We will crush them. The humans have had their moment of glory, but they cannot withstand our might." The first wave of the Xyrathian assault came fast and hard. Missiles and energy blasts rained down on the human fleet. The humans countered with their own barrage of firepower, but the Xyrathians had fortified their ships, and their new shields absorbed most of the attack. The initial clash was chaotic, with human and Xyrathian ships darting across the battlefield, exchanging fire in a symphony of destruction. "Fire the first wave," Hale shouted, his voice cutting through the noise of battle. The fusion railguns roared to life. As the projectiles shot across the distance between the two fleets, they created trails of blinding light in their wake. The Xyrathian shields flared as the first railgun shots slammed into them, but this time, the fusion power behind the projectiles was too much. One by one, Xyrathian ships exploded, their shields crumpling under the unimaginable force of the attack. Yet the Xyrathians were not dissuaded. Their counterattack came swiftly, and their new weaponry, energy beams designed to neutralize human ship systems, began to take a toll. Several human ships were disabled, their systems fried by the energy pulses, leaving them vulnerable to the Xyrathian onslaught. "Brace for impact," shouted Lieutenant Grayson, as another wave of Xyrathian fire lashed out. The Sovereign rocked as a blast slammed into its shields, but they held firm. Hale gritted his teeth. "We need to break through their defenses. Hit them with everything we've got." In a final, coordinated effort, Hale ordered a full barrage of fusion railgun shots, synchronized with the rest of the fleet. The human ships unleashed a concentrated wave of firepower, the fusion projectiles converging on the Xyrathian flagship. The Xyrathian fleet attempted to retaliate, but their new shields, designed to absorb energy, were no match for the human fusion railguns. The Xyrathian flagship shuddered under the bombardment. Its hull cracked open, and its defenses buckled. Korath's face twisted in rage as the bridge of his ship began to fall apart. He knew the battle was lost, but he wasn't ready to give up yet. "Prepare to engage the self-destruct protocols," Korath shouted to his crew, his voice laced with fury. "We will take them with us." But before he could execute the order, a final devastating volley from the Sovereign struck the heart of Korath's ship, obliterating it in an explosion that lit up the void. The Xyrathian fleet, without its leader, began to falter. Their ships, now leaderless and in disarray, were easy prey for the remaining human forces. In the span of minutes, the once mighty Xyrathian fleet was in retreat, its command structure shattered, its ships drifting in space or reduced to debris. The battle was over. The humans had won. The silence after the storm was deafening. The vast battlefield was littered with the wreckage of both Xyrathian and human ships. Captain Hale allowed himself a moment to breathe, looking out at the destruction. "We did it," Grayson said softly, breaking the silence. Hale nodded. "We did." But even in their victory, there was no celebration. The war was not truly over yet. The Xyrathians were still out there, and their empire, though wounded, would take time to fully collapse. But for the first time, humanity had proven that it could not only survive in the galaxy, it could dominate. Dr. Klein's voice came over the comms. "We've won the battle, Captain, but we'll need to work quickly to secure the galaxy. There will be no lasting peace until we ensure the Xyrathians can never recover." Hale turned to his crew, determination in his eyes. "We'll make sure they never do." The war for the galaxy was far from over, but humanity had taken its first step towards securing its future. The humans had proven that they could adapt, innovate, and above all, survive. The galaxy was theirs to shape, and nothing, not even the Xyrathians, would stand in their way.